Hey there, listeners. Welcome to PTK Pulse, your one stop shop for insights, inspiration, and everything PTK. Brought to you by Alpha Theta Omicron at Salado College, we're diving deep into the world around us, one interview at a time. For our 2024 Honors in Action project, we're on a mission to connect with our community and showcase their stories. Join us as we chat with folks from all walks of life, learning about their passions and experiences. So, grab your headphones or turn up the volume, sit back, and let the stories come to you. This is PTK Pulse.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm going to be interviewing Angelo for his life story. Angelo, thank you so much for taking the time to share your life experience and, what you've gone through. You've definitely gone through a very unique life that not a lot of people have experienced. So I really appreciate you being open here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Angela, I'm just going to start with early life and family. Wanted to kind of know what your community looked like, your family, your life. You as a child when you were born and when you were young.
So I was born in 1980. I was born at Maryville Hospital. There was good and bad. There was alcoholism and womanizing growing up, witnessing these things, and I was a obedient child and a good student probably up until sixth grade. At that specific point, parents divorcing and my maternal grandfather passing away. And the significance of my maternal grandfather passing away is that he was a strong father figure in many ways. His participation in my life took on that role more so than my own father. And losing him and having the sentiment that my family was falling apart started that progression towards negative behaviors, delinquent behaviors, fights, drug use. Eventually, that took me towards street gangs, pretty much kids in the same age group as me. I think more so older. I recall like seeing older homeboys come out of juvenile department of corrections and they would be physically fit because they had weights and girls in the neighborhood liking that and looking up to them and wanting to go through that myself.
So sorry for the passing of your maternal grandfather. So losing that father figure. It sounds like your family, was going through a hard time and falling apart. Was there anything in particular you were looking for when you joined the gang? And can you kind of educate us on why people were joining gangs?
It's rooted in a large sense, having a sense or a desire to belong. I use the phrase, I traded authenticity for a sense of belonging. And that, so I was willing to commit acts and do things outside of my natural tendencies in order to have that sense of belonging. Most individuals attracted to that lifestyle have some type of trouble in the house, maybe a single parent family, trauma, abuse, things of that nature. Um, I mean, obviously, there's individuals that have gone through worse things in their life and didn't choose certain paths in life. So, I mean, I I always put that caveat in there that I mean, there's people that have gone through a lot worse things than I have and have not chosen to do the negative things I do. And I don't ever want to have it seem like I'm conveying some sort of justification or I'm trying to mitigate my responsibility in some way. But yeah, I think when people share in hardship and suffering, even if that hardship and suffering is even self-created and chosen in some weird way, it forms a bond. I'm sure anyone listening can think of a time when perhaps their significant other or someone that they're close to, that there was shared suffering and how that it built bonds. Um,
Yeah,
Case in point, the military. Like people that are in the military, they go through boot camp, they suffer together, and that shared suffering kind of bonds them. It kind of gives this cohesion, this group cohesion, and I see that reflected in some of the gang stuff.
Yeah, I can definitely understand it. It kind of creates like its own unique family. Within that time, you had mentioned that you had gotten in trouble. Were you involved or in trouble with the law for a long time?
So I mean, I think it starts in smaller degrees, and then the amount of delinquent behavior turns into criminal behaviors, and then violence, and then more violence. Even a sense of outdoing others, wanting to be known as someone that is capable of committing and willing to commit the worst things, I guess. I mean, even within that, there's a sense of code, and that like certain things are are considered taboo. Like for instance, crimes against children, women, things of that nature. But the question has been posed like, was murder something to aspire to? And my answer is more so that it more so demonstrates your willingness to commit the the furthest extreme in order to promote, go after the goals of the group.
I see. And that's something that obviously not a lot of people have done or experienced. And one has to really understand the amount of trauma and abandonment that you must have felt and being in this system and in trouble for so long, feeling lost. So it's a horrible, horrible situation for both yourself and the family that lost their child. Have you ever given yourself a reflection or forgiven yourself from having killed someone?
I've reflected on the act, and I see it in terms of I can't, there's no way to justify anything, or like I said before, mitigate anything. Obviously I was a lost child, and so was that person. We found ourselves in dark paths, and uh nothing justifies it in any way. I mean, outside of another person trying to take your life or harm you or someone you love, there's no justification, you know? We
Yeah,
weren't we weren't part of two armies. Well, I mean, I could just say that it, there's no justification for it. Under no circumstances, the circumstances didn't line up to in any way justify the action, I guess I could say.
that makes sense. That makes sense. And Angela, can you let us know what the consequence of killing someone was and how that changed your life? Or
Yeah, so I was 17 at the time. I was charged when I was 18 years old, and I ended up receiving a sentence of 22 years flat. So I had to do 100% of that 22 years, and then eventually served 23 because I caught some extra time while in prison. Um, my
got it.
mentality as a teenager, because I think I was still a teenager when I was sentenced, probably 19, maybe 20. Uh, I felt like it was a life sentence, and I carried myself accordingly, in that I there was a sense of not caring. Um, I just found myself perpetuating that same mentality, and just those same driving thoughts and emotions, and like a sense of wanting to belong, and being part of something, and then perhaps gaining status within that subculture. It just that still was a big drive in my life. It's what influenced me to do different things while in prison as well. And like I said, just keep digging the hole deeper, and
Got it. And it's so interesting to hear that the person who you're describing is so completely different than the person who I've met and I've had the privilege to go to school with. Can you let us into what exactly changed your mentality, your heart, while you were in prison, and how long it took you to change that mentality?
Yeah, so and I was on this. I always like to use the word evolution. Like I was trying to evolve into a smarter. I wanted to weaponize myself. So the workouts I did was to be stronger, faster. Um, I I read voraciously history, um, philosophy, and that's like Machiavelli the Prince, the Discourses by Machiavelli, Sun Tzu's Art of War, philosophy, psychology. I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I studied mnemonic techniques so I didn't have to write down. I was trying to be a better criminal. Well, this in turn eventually got me to ask certain questions like why are we here? What's these big questions? And long story short, I came to a nihilistic view and was like, well, it's all a joke. It's just the answer is there is no answer. Carry on, right? I'm justifying my own bullcrap. Um, Fast forward, I end up catching another charge where I go to a Pima County jail and I read this book written by a psychologist on Kundalini yoga, and I knew what it was intellectually, so I end up having a conversation about it, and this person offers to sign me up for these courses, and I get signed up for Siddha yoga, and I read these philosophies, and I'm giving these meditation techniques, and it had this. It wasn't an instant effect, but it was cumulative, and that I uh I eventually start coming to a conclusion and identifying myself as something other than this facade I had built in order to belong, in order to not feel weak. Uh, I remember as a young person being made to feel weak and telling myself that I had never wanted to feel that way again. And I was able to slow down and analyze what drew me to this, and I could see why I chose certain paths and what how my life was shaped in that sense. And I mean, I'm harsh on myself in that I do I never want to convey glorification of anything, and I never want to minimize my impact that I had, my negative impact. And but with that said, I'm capable of having compassion for myself, and that I know what emotions and thoughts and things that transpired in my life that drew me to these things. So I guess there's a balance in that sense, and that I I could see why people choose certain things, and I can look at that and actually feel compassion for the person, even if I don't agree with the actions that they commit, and even though I don't agree with my own action, my past actions, I see how it shaped me and how things came about, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And Angelo, on your path to growth and to healing and to kind of reawakening, and changing that perspective, did you meet anybody that motivated you while in prison and then that kind of motivated you to educate? Because you are in a path where you help that same community you came from. So, how did that growth come about?
So growth spiritually came about from being introduced to that path. A desire to serve, its service is a part of that path. I met a person, I'll say Jeremy Shaw, through someone at Rio, Calicia Han. She's a project manager of correspondence courses, which obviously incarcerated learning, his a correspondence course. Um, he was interning with her, and she asked me if I minded her giving him my number, and that started a relationship, a mentorship in a way. That person is involved in recovery and reentry, and that's the field I'm in. I'm in the nonprofit sphere of that. It That relationship helped push me back in or reinforce my desire to be academically involved and pursue education, and it reinforced my desire to serve, and it kind of helped me shape my path. And other people I've met that have a connection with Rio, Cordero Holmes. He introduced me to a man named John Bastion, and that got me involved in PTK and helped me like shape what my academic goals were. And like we started off on what do I want? What do I want to do? And I came to the conclusion I want to have the most impact possible in the fields of recovery and reentry. But even that even that evolves into me seeing the problem as it is as being a community thing and not just a narrow myopic, like focusing on the justice impacted, but also their families, their children, the communities that they come from. So that means getting involved with people on the school board and promoting education and like viewing like investment into the youth as preemptive action against recidivism, and that if they never go to prison, they won't recidivize. And I mean, just I I'm we're obviously shaped by the people that we were introduced to and we spend time with. Um, like Rio's a big part of that for me. I got so much from my relationship with the school. Uh, I met I met you too, and was able to do some service projects with you, and I mean, I learned so much just like I when I met you. I mean, if I was gonna profile you, it was like after hearing your story, I like you cannot ever judge someone just on the snap, like like
Yeah.
little things. Like we never know what someone has been through and what has shaped their lives. And like until you're exposed to their heart, you don't know what who they truly are, you know?
Yes,
Um,
I do. I do know. And I think that that's the beauty of your story and that you are able to understand the empathy. It's extremely hard for people who have not walked your walk to be able to be empathetic to people who have done bad crimes. And the fact that you are going into your community, you have an understanding that it's not just the individual, but within the families, within the community, within the system itself, that there's change, that people like you who share your story, Angelo, and are willing to do the work to help that community, I think that change is very possible. So I do really admire the growth and who you've become as a person. And again, I've had that privilege of really having deep conversations with you. And um, it's a privilege for me to hear your story as someone whose family was affected by violence and gangs and stuff, to hear from the other side. So I do appreciate you being open with me. Angelo, what would you tell people if you had to go back and look back at yourself, your growth? What would you tell your community? What would your message be that you'd like to share with the world?
well, that there's hope and that people can change and they can change later in life. And Uh, I hope that listening to a story like that, someone derives hope and they find strength within themselves and a capacity within themselves to change.
That's beautiful. Again, thank you so much, Angelo, for taking the time to share your growth, your story, being vulnerable. It's exceptionally hard to be honest and honest with people who can judge you, and you are doing that by being able to be yourself and also being open and educating us on your life story. So thank you so much.
Thank you for, like I said, having me.
That is all for this episode of PTK Pulse. We hope you enjoyed hearing from our special guest. As this is for our research project, please help us out by leaving a comment below mentioning what you liked about this episode, things we can improve on, and what else you'd like to hear from in the future episodes. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Alpha Theta Omicron for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. And stay tuned for our next episode where we'll keep the storytelling going. Thank you for listening.